So, after all the discourse over Stellar Blade's main protagonist, the game is finally here, and the disconnect between the character and her design is more absurd than what she's actually wearing. For what might be the loudest outfit ever worn by a protagonist, Eve is oddly shy and withdrawn. She doesn't lean into the absurdity of her costume at all, and then that makes me wonder what the whole point of dressing her up like that was. To draw some comparisons here, Bayonetta is a franchise and a character that sells herself on being as over-the-top ridiculous as Platinum can manage, with all kinds of gloriously stupid boss fights, weapons, and combos, and they needed something equally as outrageous for the protagonist to wear, and that's why Bayonetta's sexualization works. With Nier Automata, the game takes itself far more seriously, telling a deeply philosophical narrative about what's wrong and right, and that's reflected in the conflicting black and white color scheme of 2B. Why the sexualization works in Nier Automata comes from Yoko Taro's style of storytelling and atmosphere, where he contrasts these heavy narratives with silly moments, characters, and tones. So 2B's outfit ends up blending in with the world. She also comes across as a no-nonsense, get-it-done character. She doesn't seem the type to be self-conscious about what she wears. But Eve is neither of these things. She isn't an overconfident, cocky seductress like Bayonetta, nor is she a direct go-getter like 2B. Instead, she's a doubtful and reserved character who doesn't really emote much at all. This is no doubt because Sony decided to skimp out on the casting budget and put a strict limit on the salary of the voice actors. They purposefully limited themselves to the cheapest options available, which is the core reason why many JRPGs are branded with poor voice acting. And maybe I'd feel the same way about 2B and Bayonetta if the voice actresses that were hired to play them weren't incredibly talented and versatile performers. But ignoring the disappointing performance and only focusing on the character's writing, the physical design of Eve doesn't match up with her personality. This unsure of who she is girl clashes wildly with this empowering I don't care what you have to say about my outfit design. It's like putting Mario's cheery personality in the body of Sonic's too cool for school design. It just doesn't mesh well, and it ends up creating a tonal disconnect with the character. But dressing Eve like this is no doubt a bold artistic choice, so there has to be a deeper reason than I like big boobs. So what is it? Sony is publishing this game, and they must have asked Shift Up why she was designed like this. And with how well Sony has done with being progressive in their exclusives, I find it hard to believe they would accept such a shallow answer. Now, leading up to release, I just assumed that the whole game was going to be an over-the-top Bayonetta-styled character action game, so I thought that the gameplay would justify Eve's nonsensical outfit. But contrary to my belief, Stellar Blade is a Soulsborne rather than a combo juggler, though that's my fault for avoiding the trailers. But just by looking at the box art of her jumping around in space wearing such provocative clothing, you'd really expect the game to be more of a power fantasy rather than the tame scale we're presented with, though by the end the stakes are undoubtedly raised. So I suppose the combat and the character are relatively tame when we compare Stellar Blade to its inspirations. Then what's the justification for such crazy clothing? Especially when it's in such stark contrast to how most male characters only have their head uncovered. I probably should have led with this, but I don't have any issues with sexualization in animated media, as long as it's done with the fictional character's consent. I've watched way too much anime to be able to think any other way about it. The difference with Stellar Blade is its tone. When an anime is trying to be over-the-top sexy, then usually the anime isn't all that serious, and it plays into the colourful, crazy character design with an equally weird and silly story. Nier Automata goes in the complete opposite direction, and tells a super serious but convoluted story. The contrast between the serious tone and the silly character design creates a unique atmosphere for the game that Yoko Taro has made his own. Stellar Blade isn't anywhere near as severe or silly enough to have a credible reason for dressing its female characters like this. There's not even a loose justification like Kojima came up with for Quiet in Metal Gear Solid 5. It also doesn't help that the game never acknowledges or brings up why the girls are dressed like this. Hell, even if there was some kind of purposefully sexy scene with Eve, like a bath or some poorly written conversation with Adam about her chest, then I could at least understand what kind of game Stellar Blade is trying to be, and there's nothing wrong with having blatantly over-sexualized pieces of media, as long as all parties involved are consenting and being paid exceptionally well, but Stellar Blade never tries to be that, nor is it an overly serious and compelling story. It's just a game where the girls are inexplicably wearing ridiculous outfits, and no one ever brings up why. While Stellar Blade doesn't earn the bombastic character design of Eve that has become the game's main selling point, it's still a well-made action game with intense combat. While I know the narrative will be dominated by Eve, I hope that people can still recognize that the game itself is fun. I'll be back in 2 days. In the meantime, here's a video about why Ciri shouldn't be the protagonist of The Witcher 4.